It isn't very often that I do these anymore, but when I do, I hope that I make them worthwhile. I hope that it's something that people can listen to, and even if they don't outright agree with it, they can at least accept it for the commentary that it is, and just another person's perspective. Something that seems to be way different than what the mainstream would either have you believe or what aligns with a lot of the people that are coming up today that are fans of our beloved business. Um, Originally, I was going to start this audio like all the other ones I do and be like, "Ooh, live from my mother's basement," but um, the mood really doesn't foster that right now, and I'm sorry if that's a downer for anybody out there that usually gets a kick out of my more jovial side. Um, I'm still trying to find it these days. Uh, I don't have a lot of time to watch wrestling anymore, and I think that in and of itself, that's what really makes me feel a little bit brushed aside as a fan when, the moments that you can devote to it, they don't leave you as in awe and as jaw dropped as, previous years and past experiences. And that's not to say that everybody should be jaded and look to the past as these huge glory days that we can never have again, and always toot the horn that nothing will measure up to that. Um, those moments were unique. They were they were ideal wrestling conditions. We really haven't had those same ideal wrestling conditions. Um, and what I want to really get into today isn't, a defense on my stance of being against, the WWE. It's not trying to promote TNA or any other more locally grown wrestling product because I've been going to, independent shows now for a while, and I do enjoy them a lot. This is going to be a commentary on TNA in particular, and it's it's going to be a little bit different from how I normally approach it. Everybody knows that I'm usually very fanboyish when it comes to the TNA product, and I think a lot of that stems from how I approach the TNA product. Now, if we go back in history, for those of you that don't know, I was a very big fan of the WCW. And when they closed up shop and they closed their doors, that was probably one of the first nails in the coffin for me as a fan. And back then, when they did close shop in 2001, I I was only 17 years old at the time, so I was still in an impressionable stage. Um, and So there was a lot of emotion on my part. A couple of years later, when the WWE really stopped focusing on the brand split so much, and other little promotions were coming up, but nothing was really able to compete. I began to look for something else to satiate my needs that I wanted met as a fan, and nothing really did it. Um, None of the other promotions really understood the same formula for the undercard that WCW had produced for me. And although the WWE at the time had a stacked roster in terms of the depth of their talents, they didn't seem to cash in on, really the proper card structure that I really craved, and the going from, small potatoes up to their main event. A lot of the segments, a lot of the things going on were about big time players and big time spots, and even the big time players were feuding over minor titles. And if that elevated the title, so be it. It's awesome that a Jericho and a Benoit and whatever and a Eddie Guerrero and shit, they can feud over an intercontinental title. That's fine, but they were they were well on their way to being past that mid card status when they were acquired. And so the thing about it is when I started to really gravitate toward TNA was not even in their beginning years, but more along. I'd say 2007 was a good year where I really started to sink my teeth in. Maybe 2006. I know that I, to this day, will quote the three-way match between Daniels, Joe, and Styles as being probably one of the best wrestling matches that's ever been put on. Just the big-time feel, the build-up to it, and the execution was amazing. The amount of athleticism, etc. And that was 2005. But, you get to be 2014, and you're wondering, well, what's going on? How come nobody's really getting it right for the taste that I have? And, we're allowed to be wrestling fans with secular beliefs and different tastes. I'm not telling anybody to change the way that they think, the way that they operate. I'm not telling anybody not to, stop spending their money on whatever they think is entertaining. It's fine. You do your own thing. I'm not trying to dismiss anybody with an opinion that is different than mine. I think everybody has an opinion, and as long as it's an honest opinion, it should be listened to, not for the sake of trolling, not for the sake of spreading, misinformation and hate and all that other garbage. There's no room for that here. I realize it's the internet and it's going to be out there, but we're better than that, guys. So, the TNA, as of lately, the last few years, even with the acquisition of the Hogan and the Flair and everything else, they've failed to really capitalize on what made the show great for me and what made me such a big fan of WCW back in the day. Now, that's not to say that I don't enjoy the in-ring work and that I can't, give it up and be entertained as far as, the amount of athleticism that's going on and the ability to tell a story in the ring or not. That's fine. I mean, they're either treading water or better with that all the time. I don't particularly think that there is any huge flop or, just a bomb going off that stinks when it comes to the in-ring action side with TNA. But what I do have a problem with lately is just a lot of I'm trying to find the correct wording here because I don't want to sound like anybody else that's complaining. I want to be structural and give an honest critique here where it's probably due. And since I haven't done one of these, in some time, in a month, 2 months, 6 months, whatever the trend has been, I don't want to come out here and say the first thing that's on my mind because that might not be accurate. And then you're going to get a different view in your own mind of what the hell I'm trying to say here. And if I'm not reading off of a pre-written essay and I'm not doing as good as other people that you might listen to that are shooters in the community, that's because I usually like to come on here and do it entirely unscripted. And obviously this is one of the times where you're seeing that it's not a lie. I do that and then I get lost. But let's take into account even just the pay-per-view side of things and the weekly just the Impact shows in general from Thursday to Thursday and the feeling that's the vibe that's giving off. In TNA's defense recently, we've seen the acquisition of newer talents, and that's cool. And they just had a program with, Sam Shaw, who was one of their original Gut Check guys, and they didn't can him, which was cool. And he's got a new character. It seems to be working. It seems to be growing on the audience. There's a lot of interaction with the whole creepy bastard thing. I like it. I've got to say that I do enjoy this new range of character that he seems to have developed here, and the way that he can just go through and emulate, the character that it is. I don't need to be the one to shed the light on the conversation that has already taken place. Everybody referencing that he's an American Psycho, Dexter, kind of serial killer, weirdo in his own mind, psychopath, sociopath. It's already been talked about. What I can say is that I enjoy the creative little twists and just how it even has a comedy factor to it, so it's not too serious. It's not just this guy that's going around choking people out with wires like in, some kind of James Bond video game or a shooter, or, it's not like that. It's got layers to it, and it helps you to become invested in the storyline as well when it's over the top enough to remind you that it's just entertainment, but it has the creepy enough stuff to, keep you sucked in, and it's not going to burn you out that way. So, kudos to that, and it lends itself to, a really good character for, the performer to be able to go out there and represent. But in terms of their other things that are going on with TNA, the X Division, let's say. There was only one X Division match and or thing going on. And it's not even their regular talent that they had before. They brought in Tigre Uno, they brought in Sonata to have a best of series, but we haven't seen any of the other X Division, either regulars or not so regulars, or even that style of match, unless it's those guys going forward. And I think that that's a problem, because that's the card structure, that's the high-paced action, that's the opening that we need to really get energized. And any of this Dixie Carter, Bully Ray, main event, Eric Young style stuff to open the show, it seems like it's not doing it for me. It seems like we could get to that. We could center the show around that without opening the show with that all the time. And nothing against Eric Young, because I think he's an incredible performer, but when you've got other people coming into the picture to steal his spotlight, and when you've got a guy like Magnus that I felt did a good job as what they gave him to work with, but then just they buried him because he could never really get a victory or could never really do anything without the help of like 20 other people. He became the paper champion that they were, chanting at him, that was supposed to have been an insult, but in reality it was kind of the truth. They did everything they could to undercut him, to make him seem like he didn't deserve the title. And if you're going to have a guy hold it like that and win it the way that he did, why not follow through with it and try to establish that this guy's the real deal? So, anyway, getting back to the point of that kind of went on its own little tangent there. The X Division not being featured, in any kind of prominence, with any kind of build-up to a number one contendership, it's been vacant. It's been, one segment on the show, if it makes it week to week. You've got Kenny King that came back and tried to insert himself into it, and then that was awkward, and then they kind of forgot about it, and then they were getting back to it, and then he was in MVP's office, and then now he wasn't on commentary. It's just he wasn't there, and it's awkward, and you can't do that to people. You can't give them a tease and then pull off and then not do it and not go through with it. If you bring somebody back and you need to have a plan for them. Otherwise, don't debut it. You need to be able to write the show and schedule things to have happen, and budget enough time to really feature what it is that you need to feature week to week to get people to care enough to order this pay-per-views. Now that you've streamed down the amount, you've streamlined anyway the amount of pay-per-views that you have, they should feel like a big deal. They shouldn't feel like at the last minute you're throwing it together. There's another company that does that, and they're called the WWE. If you're not one of the two marquee feuds on the pay-per-view, then you really don't have a place on it. You're just kind of like, and we're going to have these two go at it. So TNA really loses me in the shuffle with their whole X Division thing because it's just not there. It doesn't feel like it's part of the show. It doesn't feel like it's part of the company anymore. It's almost like, why have a title if you don't have a big section and a big focus on these guys going at it, doing their particular brand of, the craft that they do, and which was pure athleticism, which was what really got TNA noticed in the first place. So that's one of the things. The second thing is the tag team situation in TNA. Now, I get that the Wolves are supposed to be a big shot in the arm, but who have they brought in, or who have they built up in order to be the next challengers for them? I get the whole thing that you were going to put the belts on them, and that was the plan when they came in, and they were supposed to rule the division and be able to accept all challenges, whatever. But now that they've beaten the Bromans and whatever, there isn't anybody else fighting for a shot at them. It's just, well, they're on top, and people will come to them as we put some kind of team together. It's not that we have established teams. It's not that we're giving, tag matches throughout the night that would allow yourself to be in contendership for these titles. And if we do have tag team matches, it's usually between people that are in the main event level that we're just trying to get them on TV, and this is a way to do it, is feature them all in one match in one segment because we aren't budgeting our time correctly. And that kind of is frustrating because TNA for me, it was about two things in particular. And this is not to say that the Knockouts division wasn't excellent as well, but just as a fan of wrestling, I like high-speed wrestling and I like tag team wrestling. Those are my two things that I really like and enjoy. And when TNA had that, they were making me very interested, and I was tuning in, and I cared. But without those aspects, it just gets to the point where it's like, well, what am I doing? And then it gets to the point of, well, if I'm asking that, it's not really what am I doing, it's what are they doing? And I think that the answer to that, what are they doing, is that they're not giving themselves enough really time to build up these personal heated rivalries. They give us a feud, yeah, but either it burns itself out or it takes entirely too long to orchestrate. And sometimes it doesn't feel organic. A lot of the times it feels forced, like with the whole Bully Ray and Bobby Roode thing with the tables, and then Dixie Carter was involved, and it doesn't work like that. It needs to be between two people. If you want to bring in a swerve, that's fine, but it can't then become about Dixie Carter versus Bully Ray, which is what it's done. It's not about Bobby Roode. It's not about how he got a victory. It's not about enhancing his character. It's about Dixie Carter versus Bully Ray, which should not ever be the focus of that show. And this is one of the most pro-TNA people that you can have admit and say this. So just keep that in mind. I go to bat a lot of the time for TNA, and I'll say things like, how Lockdown felt like there was more build-up and a bigger sense of show to it than even WrestleMania 30 had. And I'll stand by that. I don't know if it was as good of a show as WrestleMania 30, and I know that when I watched Lockdown, the main event with Abyss coming out from under the ring with the whole shenanigan crap that was going on in order to protect Magnus and not allow a real definitive finish to that match was just, it made me very nauseous. I had a knot in my stomach the whole time. I felt kind of betrayed because that was an opportunity to do a lot of good that just it had some stupid ending to get itself out of the pickle that it was in, which, no, it wasn't in a pickle. It was a great opportunity, but they treated it like, oh shit, well, we just got to get rid of this title defense, and then we can move on to something else, which we didn't really move on to either after Joe. Just kind of looked like it was half-assed. Okay, well, we'll hotshot Eric Young. I mean, not that he doesn't deserve it, but could we do it with a little bit of build? And not only that, but there's enough guys on that roster that if you didn't have particular direction for these people, why are we not putting them in a tag team? Now, again, I said that a lot of the stars that they've been tagging up in matches don't need to be put into tag team matches, and one of the examples of that would have been the Bully Ray and Gunner tag team against Beer Money. Now, I know that everybody wants to see Beer Money come back, and with the way that James Storm has been doing the job all the time, I think that that wouldn't be a bad thing for him. And since Bobby Roode isn't getting any closer to the title, it wouldn't be a bad thing for him either, but they didn't need to be doing that. They didn't need to be in that tag match for no reason. If they do that, they should bring the tag team back for a purpose, and that would be to take the belts and to be dominant, not to just advance a segment where we're putting over Gunner and then to build up hype to some table match that ends up being about Dixie Carter versus Bully Ray. That's not the way to do it on week-to-week television, and that's just, it's either laziness or it's a lack of foresight, and one almost is the same as the other if you're thinking about it. I mean, if you're not looking ahead to what the ramifications might be, and if you're not planning well enough ahead, then that is laziness. I get that things can change and you have to make last-minute accommodation, but also with wrestling there should be the point where it is entertaining, but that you've put the work into it and you're not just kind of coasting. Because that's how I feel that the other company operates there on the top. And if you're going to be an alternative, if you're going to be something that stands out from that, you can't follow the same formula. You can't do the same things. One of the things that they're doing right is the EC3 character, and I love how Rockstar Spud is like his personal cheerleader. That is entertaining to me. But watching them get crushed at Sacrifice by Kurt Angle and Willow, they didn't get in any offense. There was more stalling than anything, and it was kind of like a time sink. It was like a waste. It didn't prove to me that, anything other than that they don't want to fight, that they were scared, and that Rockstar Spud got fed to the wolves. And if that was the case, they could have done without all that parading outside the ring. He could have just let Rockstar Spud go first and walked off, saved us about 6-7 minutes worth of nothing. They could have made a hot tag from one to the other between Angle and Willow and be done. And I'm not really enjoying Kurt Angle like I have in the past, and I don't understand how he gets to keep coming back and cutting promos that just, they're bad. It sounds like he wrote them on a bar napkin and didn't really try. This is a guy that when he had a filter and when he had people working with him years ago was a dominant force and who couldn't be beat and was a cyborg, and now he's like a relic of the past and he should be putting people over, and he knows how to do that. That was the reason he came to TNA, supposedly. That's why they paid him all that money to do it. And I'm just not entertained. I want to see EC3 beat the crap out of him, and smart Mark aside, I shouldn't want to see that because I should be in the position of having sympathy for Kurt Angle, but I don't. But again, this is really poor card structure because you're giving EC3 Kurt Angle when EC3 hasn't really as of yet built himself up to that spot. Who has he come in and really beat besides jobbers? And then They threw him Hardy, and then they pulled shenanigans, and then now they're throwing him Angle, and they're pulling shenanigans with it. And I get that a heel can use his intelligence to overcome things, or they can use superior numbers, but there gets to be a point where he needs to have, a couple of regular victories under his belt that look convincing. He's got a lot of things going for him, and he definitely has the ability to entertain people. But they need to let him break free and be able to do it. And the sooner they can get him away from Kurt Angle, I think the better, because he's not a good foil for him. So there's no X Division stuff going on, really. They get one thing per week, maybe. There's no tag team stuff going on. I mean, the matches that we're given are just like either rematches or they're gimmicky, and they're not just straight up athletic competitions. That's not the fault of the Bromans. That's not what their purpose was. Their purpose was to be arrogant and to drop the titles to a deserving team. That's all they were there for. They are being used as enhancement talent. They're very entertaining. And the fact that they were able to use Zema Ion in that DJ position as long as they had with them was pretty brilliant. But the Wolves don't have challengers. There's no other team that's together. I mean, even just the fact that they're not together. There is no other team. By process of elimination, you have to feud with the Bromans because there is no other fucking tag team. And that's sad. From a division that used to have a very deep pool of talent. And I get that you don't have Alex Shelley anymore. You're not going to have the Motor City Machine Guns. Okay, that's fine. But who did we groom to take their place? We don't have a Chavo and a Hernandez anymore, even though that team lasted way too long. Something could have been done. We could have had other people. We don't have Christopher Daniels and Kazarian anymore. We let those contracts go. We didn't re-sign them. We could have put them against the Wolves. We could have had a very competitive, multi-week, even up to like 2-month, 3-month program with them. As long as we kept it fresh and we didn't just let it be matches, which sometimes is the problem. But there's nobody else. There's the Wolves. They are the tag team division. The Wolves, unless they're going to fight themselves, there's nothing else for them to do. They've already reached the highest they can reach, which is sad. Because they haven't been there that long. And they were supposed to be able to have good competition upon acquisition with TNA, which is a company that had prided themselves on tag team wrestling. So that's a little bit depressing. And if there's no tag team wrestling, that means that there aren't enough X Division guys currently on the roster getting exposure, because a lot of the times you would just throw two X Division people together and they'd be a tag team. Even if it was just for a week, even if it was for 2 weeks, nothing. So a lot of what made me interested in TNA is even not there anymore. Now granted, Angelina Love came back for the women's division, which I think is good. They could use 2 or 3 more fresh faces in that division. And by faces, I don't mean good guys, I mean just people. Because I don't really want to see Angelina Love versus Madison Rayne or a Gail Kim anymore. We've seen it. It's been there, done. Where's Tessmacher? Why not bring her back? How come she's not feuding with, the bad people, the beautiful people? She's a former champion, and I know that she just did the whole Aces and Eights thing, being the jiggly butt girlfriend of Bully Ray, but she was a mega over babyface at the time that she was, winning the title and defending the title and everything. And they need to get her back to that. And they need to show her on TV week to week so we don't forget that she works there. And that would be fresh feuds with Tessmacher. Until we get this Brittany Santana Garrett person into a position where she deserves, some limelight. Also, where is ODB besides backstage doing a segment, hitting Abyss with a stick, and then not being on TV for a couple weeks. That doesn't make sense to me. So you got 3 divisions that you could really work on and fix. And in fact, there's even room for improvement in your main event, because now that the Magnus and Eric Young thing has petered itself out, you also have to take into consideration, if Eric Young wants to defend that title every week, does that make it so that the title isn't as special anymore? It's always free TV with Impact, with TNA. They only have this certain number of pay-per-views. So if you are defending the title every week, it's 52 weeks out of the year. You need to settle down on that. You need to do other things. You need to either come up with creative new challenges for Eric Young, or you need to have interview segments, or you need to have angles that don't involve just being in matches all the time. Eric Young is a guy that could help carry that company forward, but I fear that they're going to do the same thing that they did with Magnus, is that it's going to be overexposure, and they're not going to take it to the length that they took it when they had a guy like Sting or Angle or like a Christian even. I realize I'm going and digging from the past here, but it's kind of what we have to work with. Even an AJ Styles, who is no longer there. And I know that they need to get new guys, new horses ready for that main event. That's fine. But where's Austin Aries in all of this? He's just kind of lost now. Either he was working a program with MVP, or he was not on the program, or then he was in another match, or then they were arguing, but then he wasn't on the pay-per-view, and it didn't make sense. People there need to be on TV, even if it's a quick 30 seconds worth of, hey, what are you doing? We're backstage. Oh, I'm on my way to go do this. You know, just, they need to be featured so that they can be relevant. If you go 3 weeks without seeing Austin Aries, what does that mean? You know, it's like, well, does he work here? Does he not work here? How can I be invested in his character, even though he's a great performer, if I go weeks without seeing him, when he's supposed to be a fan favorite, when he's supposed to really get everybody invested in matches and angles that he's in, if he's not there to be featured in the angles or the interview or to get anybody invested? Anybody that's saying that Eric Young is a poor man's version of Daniel Bryan, I can't agree with you. Now, that's not to say that Daniel Bryan isn't a very talented competitor and that he deserves this spot. He worked for it really hard and he had to go through a lot of shit to get there. But Eric Young is also a guy that's put in a lot of dues. And I get that he did a lot of comedy shit, and I get that he didn't have a good amount of feature as a serious character, but when he did, he nailed it. And if you see him live, he is such an entertaining performer. And they just need to give him a chance to showcase his ability as a serious competitor rather than playing off the crowd when they're chanting Super Eric when he's starting to get into the ring. And they need to find an opponent for him that is going to help highlight his strengths. And maybe an opponent that can really talk in order to try to talk him down so that when he overcomes them, it's a big deal. But I don't think that it should be an every week thing. Or there should be contract signings, or there should be other things to get in the way of always having the title on the line. Maybe he could do commentary. Maybe instead of having a 3 or 4 match thing during the night to determine who the next contender will be, Willie or Nilly, that they should actually have matches and rankings and things that determine who's going to be the number 1 contender, so that they're not just waltzing somebody else back into there. That said, we haven't seen Samoa Joe in a little bit. If that's going to be the next thing, that would be logical. But where's the video package Why should this just be some big surprise? Make it so that you want us to feel like we're along for the ride with you rather than just watching it happen. And that's really about all I can say right now as to the state of TNA. I do enjoy the product for what it is. I do enjoy the ring work for what it is. But trying to wrap my head around it logically and try to sort out what's going on, I get as lost as anybody else. And not that it warrants people coming along and being like, oh, TNA is TNA again, it sucks all the time, it's not WWE. I get the reason why people are tearing it apart sometimes, because they're frustrated. They see what could be a great company and a great chance to, be the number 2 wrestling company in the world, and they're squandering it just by doing a lot of the weird shit that they're doing. I hope that this hasn't been incredibly boring. I hope that you've heard some things that you can kind of debate with me here. I always welcome, the comments underneath, and I get back to everybody. Let me know what you think. Let me know where you are as a fan. Try to keep it about TNA. I don't want people to bring in here and be like, "The Shield is the best stable in wrestling right now." That has nothing to do with this video audio thing. If you want to compare 2 guys, go for it. If you want to try to illustrate for or against the Daniel Bryan, Eric Young comparison, go ahead. But it boils down to more than 2 guys with beards and titles. It really does. And anybody that is a fan that can look at it as more than just 2 guys with beards and titles, those are the kind of comments that I would really enjoy on the video, so that I could really have a discussion. And again, the point of this whole commentary is so that you can find something that you like and be able to discuss it. Anyway, guys, this has been a My Mother's Basement production, and I hope you've been sports entertained.